Good afternoon, viewers. Today I will continue with my analysis of Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats. In my last lecture, I had discussed some aspects of the Romantics, the movements of symbolism and imagism, and also some facts about Keats's personal life. The Romantic movement in poetry began from 1798 when Wordsworth and Coleridge jointly published their work, Lyrical Ballads. The poets Keats, Byron, and Shelley were younger than Wordsworth and Coleridge, whom we can consider to be the founders of the Romantic movement in poetry. But their ideas were the same. These Romantics were poets who were basically humanitarian, which went against the previous centuries or the previous ages movement of rationality and satire and reason. Their philosophy was humanitarian. They were full of imagination. They were passionate about nature. Their ideals were different, and they had their own original. They were not different from each other, but their ideals were certainly different from the previous age. They had the same perception about expression, and their sources of inspiration were nature, imagination, and emotion. Keats, all these great poets, were great in their own original ways. Keats is one of the greatest poets of English literature. His 6 odes are considered to be masterpieces. Generally, the perception about Keats is that he was very sensitive, but all poets are sensitive. But he had a feeling of pessimism. There was a morbidity in his temperament. He felt things too deeply and almost obsessively thought about them, and he was a pessimist. Certainly, his pessimistic attitude towards life had to do with his personal losses also, especially Ode to a Nightingale is inspired by, or what led to him expressing himself in this beautiful ode is the death of his younger brother Tom, who had died of tuberculosis in 1818. And this ode was published, or was written by him in 1819. Ode to a Nightingale is a perfectly composed ode in stanzas of 10 lines each, and it has 8 stanzas. The rhyme scheme is uniform. The sentences or the lines are uniform. The rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, C, D, E, C, D, E. 10 lines in each stanza, perfectly composed, in perfect symmetry. What makes this ode so unusual and so haunting, and the qualities behind this ode which are, make it immortal, like the nightingale to which he has addressed this ode. Like I said, the nightingale is a symbol, and it is a symbol of perfection, because Keats, after the death of his brother in particular and the losses of his family members earlier, his father, his grandfather, his mother, and his grandmother, his uncle, had sort of developed a morbid temperament. And then later on, it seemed that he was foreshadowed by a feeling of mortality, because he also died from tuberculosis. So many critics say that though he is a poet who has created everlasting beauty, still there is a morbidity in his temperament. Certainly he broods, and his brooding has led to this haunting ode, which I like to say that it sort of expresses a Midsummer Night's Dream, a poet in a kind of a self-hallucination, in a pursuit for beauty, for perfection, which he is very disappointed not to find in this life. There is a sense of despair, and certainly there is a sense of gloom. But Keats's pessimism, his awareness of mortality, his awareness of the transience of beauty has led to his great odes, his longing for that loveliness, but his consciousness that that loveliness is just fleeting, like the dream, like a Midsummer Night's Dream. And once we begin reading this ode from the very first line, I almost think that it is like a magical mystery tour, the song or the album by the Beatles, because all great art has points of similarity. So it's like a magical mystery tour where the poet transports himself and his readers away from the sorrow of the world, away from the unhappiness which he feels, and tries to forget it momentarily. And in doing so, he has left a lasting testimony to loveliness in this ode. It is addressed to a nightingale. A nightingale almost achieves, symbolic proportions in this ode because the nightingale might be a figment of his imagination. He calls it the invisible word. So maybe he just saw it in its hypnotic state, in his self-hypnosis. Or maybe it was real. It was actually a song, a melodious song, which transported him to this world where he reveled in the beauty, but only for a brief time, because like all dreams, this dream also faded away, as the last stanza tells us. But does this ode leave us with a feeling of being bereft? No, it does not. It touches us with its loveliness and with the dream or the vision of the poet who was almost in a feverish state of mind. Such imagination and such creation of beauty can only have a kind of a mystical source. And undoubtedly, Keats was, at the moment when he wrote this beautiful ode, inspired by something spiritual, something magical, something mystical. It is, like I said, like a mystical, magical tour. So let us look at the ode, one stanza by one, because it is written in 8 stanzas with a perfect rhyme scheme composed in perfect symmetry. And it is very subjective. The romantics looked at the world through their own perception, like all poets do, like all writers do, but they expressed their emotions. They expressed how they viewed that reality, how they felt about it, and what feelings it evoked in their minds. So the very first stanza, it starts on a note of sorrow. The poet says, "My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains." So this feeling of being dazed, he's almost in a haze. He is feeling delirious. And he says that this drowsy numbness creates a feeling, an ache, a loss in my mind. Or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute passed, and lethe words had sunk, and not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that then light shaped dried of the trees on some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. So this stanza of 10 sentences, 10 lines, creates the state of mind of Keats for his readers. He is in a, like I said, in a almost delirious state. His sense of a pain, an ache, and loss, a loss, something which has numbed him with sorrow. And he says that it seemed to be pulling me lethe words. Now, what is lethe? we will find that these poets use a lot of Greek imagery because Greek literature was something which they had read and studied. And Lethe is a state of oblivion. So he says that I almost seem to drown in my despair, and it seemed to drag me down towards Lethe. Lethe is that, that state of mind when there is complete forgetfulness. There's an oblivion when one does not want to remember, and because to remember is to feel sad, and that sadness is something which the poet is trying to escape. So he says that this despair seemed to drown me, it seemed to overpower me, so that I was feeling that I was being dragged down to a state of blackness, of oblivion, of complete annihilation in my mind. But suddenly I heard the song of this nightingale. Now you see the change of mood in the last lines. He calls it a dryad. Dryad is a nymph, something beautiful, something like a fairy, something which is an image or a symbol of loveliness. A dryad is magical. And so suddenly, in that state of numbness, he hears that song, maybe in his imagination or maybe in reality, we don't really know. But this creates this breakthrough, this song, this melody. It seems to break through his reverie, his blackness, the black despair which overwhelms him, and it transports him. So, but he takes the first steps. It is very gradual. He says that I feel as if I am being lifted, my spirit is being lifted, because I heard that song of the nightingale coming from some melodious plot. And beach and green, these are the colors and the sounds and the signs of life. So the poet does not drown in despair, or he is lifted up. His soul seems to find a new solace, something to hang on to, and he is lifted up by the song of this nightingale, and he slowly starts moving from his despair. And this Lethe, this image from Greek classical literature, is an image of despair, of black despair, of drowning into sadness and complete oblivion. That is that numbness of senses, feelings, emotions, that daze, that sort of frozen state of mind when one does not want to remember and one tries to forget. And then in the second stanza, suddenly when he takes those first steps, the movement of the poem is, the ode is very rapid. And in the second stanza, he's already calling for a draught of vintage. Vintage is, of course, vintage wine. Again, an image of life, of beauty, of loveliness. Oh, for a draught of vintage that hath been cooled a longer age in the deep delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and provincial song and sunburnt mirth. So he talks about dance and song and sunburnt mirth and summer and happiness, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, and purple-stained mouth, that I might drink and leave the world unseen, and with thee fade away into the forest dim. So already he's ready to escape the world, but not with any suicidal thoughts or any gloom and sorrow completely overwhelming him. But he has already moved forward the end of the first stanza, and now second he's going towards dance and laughter and wine and songs and beaded bubbles, that sensuous image of a glass or a tumbler full of wine, and sunburnt mirth, that is laughter, unending laughter, and sunburnt, obviously summer. the time of happiness. And he says that I wish to feel intoxicated. Now, blushful Hippocrene. Hippocrene is again an image from Greek mythology and Greek literature. It means a fountain of inspiration. It is a mythical fountain where the poets would drink and find their creativity, their muse. Here, the muse is the nightingale. And when Keats has discovered the nightingale, his joy seems to be carrying him forward, and he wishes to delve into his imagination. Hippocrene, create. There's a sort of rebirth for him. It is almost as if in the first stanza, he's in a frozen state, numb, almost like it's like a rebirth for him, because in that first stanza, in the first lines, he is like an embryo which is still in uterus and before birth. And as he hears the song, he comes forward into the world, steps forward from the darkness. And now almost immediately in the next stanza, the second stanza, he is in a world of laughter and dance and song and wine and happiness and invoking his muse. He has forgotten his despair, and now he wants to create something. That feeling of creativity is replace the despair which he had been feeling. Fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget what thou amongst the leaves hast never known. The weariness, the fever, and the fret, here where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad last grey hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow, and leaden eyes despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. So again, the third stanza with its 10 lines. And like I said, the movement is swift, but there is a pause here, because before stepping into that world of loveliness, there is again a memory of this world where he talks about mortality, where there are gray hairs, sickness, death. Youth grows spectre thin. That is his brother, who was consumed by consumption, by tuberculosis, and who died very young at the age of 19. That young death, where there is nothing but unhappiness, where people suffer, they hear each other groan, and where there are leaden-eyed despairs, the despair and the sorrow, and the old age, and the sickness and helplessness, and even beauty. Keats had always longed for perfection, for beauty. He was an aesthete, and that is why he has always said that a thing of beauty is joy forever, and loveliness for him is everything. But he says that in this world, this mortal world, age and death are inevitable. Beauty also faces the ravages of time, and Shakespeare has also lamented about how beauty cannot last forever and how time is more powerful. But here, even something which is perfect, that is why in his Ode to a Grecian Urn, he marvels at the loveliness which has survived all down the ages. And here, but he says beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes or her loveliness or her perfection forever, and it also yields to time's destruction. So in these first three stanzas, each stanza is complete in itself because it expresses a feeling and rounds it off. It does not carry it over to the next stanza. So the first stanza, his blankness, his frozen state of mind and body and spirit and soul. He is gradually becoming aware of something magical beckoning him. In the second stanza, his consciousness, his awareness, his longing, his delight in the beauty of the world, of wine, of song, of dance, of laughter, and how a nightingale is beyond all this, because he wishes to lose himself in the forest rim, just like the nightingale is a part of the beach and green and melodious plot, and on a different plane, not a part of this world, which is full of sorrow and sickness and death and old age and despair. His brother's death is, of course, a constant pain, it's a constant agony. But at the same time, the depth of the feeling is so profound, and the feelings are so deep. But at the same time, we are amazed at the restraint of Keats's expression. It is very, very refined. It is completely restrained. And that is the power of genius, that he does not need to dwell on it too long to make the readers aware of it. In the fourth stanza, away, away, for I will fly to thee, not charioted by Bacchus and his bards, but on the flueless wings of poesy, through the dull brain perplexes and retards. Already with thee, tender is the night, and haply the queen moon is on her throne, clustered around with all her starry face. But here there is no light, save what from heaven to with the breezes blown, though verdurous glooms and winding mossy ways. So in the fourth stanza, again that perfect construction, his you can get a feeling of his impatience and his urgency and his desire, which is so strong that he will break off everything which is holding him back. And he says, away, away, I will fly to thee. He says, I can no longer stay back up and not be transported into that magical world to which you are beckoning me. And I will fly to you, not in my body, but in my spirit. Bacchus is the god of wine, and charioted by the pards. Pards are supposed to be on a chariot, which is, the leopards are the team who carry his chariot forward. Very magical and mythical image, again from Greek literature and Greek myths. And he says, I will not physically fly, but on the winged winds of poesy, his imagination, his inspiration, his creativity, his gift of visualizing something, his vision. And he says, this, I will not hold myself back, but I will fly to you. And I don't need anyone, but only my imagination, the poetic soul which I have will take me. And by the end of the stanza, he feels that he is already there, and here there is no light. He says, I will fly in that space, in that where there are Queen Moon with her starry attendants. But he says, where am I? There's a feeling of unreality. He says, where am I? It is darkness all around. So it is like a dream world. It is like he is in a world which he has to find his way around. It is, he is in a state of mind where he cannot decide whether it is real or unreal. But he's aware that it is only his imagination, his power of vision that has taken him there. And he says that I have to, in this dark world, I have to grope my way around. But he's not afraid. There is a sense of breathlessness. There is a sense of exploration. There is a sense of anticipation. There is a desire to lose himself further and further in this world. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs, but in the embalmed darkness guess each sweet, wherewith the seasonable month endows, the grass, the thicket, and the fruit tree wild, white hawthorn and the pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and my mid-May's eldest child, the coming musk rose, full of dewy wine, the murmurous haunt of the flies on summer eves. Now he says that I am in an embalmed darkness. This is truly like a magical world. It is like a dream world. And embalmed, again covered with darkness, almost like he is in a womb. And he is taking his small steps forward. And in this womb in darkness which covers him, and where he feels as if he is walking in a dream, he can feel the fragrance. He is conscious of the beauty, the humming of the bees, the fullness of the season, the scents which float on the air, the fruit trees, eglantine, the musk rose, and it is as if his senses are overpowered and they are overwhelmed, and he is in a blissful state. He wishes to remain like this. That, feeling of security when the child is in the womb, that embalmed darkness, that complete, safety, that feeling of security and warmth, and the bees and the scents and the sounds and the flowers which he can dimly feel in this twilight world, which is so lovely that he is almost afraid that it will disappear. It is like a dream. Now, in the sixth stanza, there's a break in the rhythm. So far, we have seen that the rhyme scheme is A, B, C, D, E, C, D, E. Here, the eighth line does not follow a rhyme. It seems as if it is a cry which is coming from his soul. Let us see what it is. Darkling I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death, called him soft names in many a muse rhyme, to take into the air my quiet breath. In the first four lines, Keats, as though he is charmed and he's ecstatic, full of an ecstasy because of this loveliness. There's a state of bliss in his mind, and he says that in this perfect moment, I have always longed for death, and he calls it easeful. Easeful means it will bring me rest. I will be away from the worries and the sorrow and the pain and the loss and the agony which I experience in this world. It will be a state of peace. And I have longed for death. I have called to death. I have asked death to take me and claim me. Now more than ever it seems rich to die, to seize upon the midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. So see, this eighth line does not follow the CDE pattern. And it is like a break, almost as if this is something which the poet wants to emphasize. And he says, when I have longed for death, this would be the perfect moment to die, because this world full of the flowers and the loveliness and half dark, when I am semi-conscious, I'm only aware of the loveliness, your song filling the world around me. And this would be the moment when it will be like a bliss, a release to die. When thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. This line does not follow the pattern of CDE. Still wouldest thou sing, and have ears in vain, to the high requiem become a sword. So CDE, and we can say this F in such an ecstasy would, the line can be marked as F, then again CD. So it seems as if there's a break here which he wishes to emphasize, that this is the moment which I would like to die, when I am in such a state of ecstasy. I'm feeling so ecstatic, and this loveliness is filling the world around me. Still you would go on singing, but to the high requiem is that that melody, that song on a elevated scale, I would become a sod. Sod is a dead piece of earth. So I would be beyond everything. I would die in bliss, and to your ecstasy, the loveliness of your song, the ecstasy of your song, I would be deaf, and I would be like an inanimate piece of this earth. Now, like I told you, in such an ecstasy is a sudden break. It seems like a cry which is coming from his soul. Now, the seventh stanza again goes back to that old rhyme scheme: ABC, ABC. I'm sorry, AB, AB, CDE, and CDE. Thou wast not born for death, immortal bird. No hungry generations tread thee down. The voice I hear the passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and the clown, perhaps the self-same song that found a path through the sad heart of Ruth when, sick for home, she stood in tears amid the alien corn, the same that oft times hath charmed magic casements opening on the foam of perilous seas in fairy lands forlorn. And then this stanza, the seventh stanza, which goes back to the old rhyme scheme of AB, AB, CDE, CDE. He addresses the bird directly, and he says, you calls it immortal bird. He says, you were not born for death. You are immortal. That song, that loveliness is a part of human history. It was heard in the ancient days by the emperor and the clown, and it does not discriminate. It is something which is meant for the emperor as well as the clown. It is meant for humanity. These lines again emphasize on the humanitarianism of the philosophy of the Romantics. And Keats, though his sensuality is also a part of his poetic temperament, his creativity, this philosophy of humanitarianism is also very much present. And this sensuality is not merely for decorative purposes, but it has a deep, profound quality. Because in these lines, he says that in the ancient times, this song was there. It was meant for all. It was like a boon to humanity. It was not merely for the rich and the powerful, but the simple and the ordinary. And Ruth is a story. The story of Ruth is from the book of Ruth in Bible, where she followed her mother-in-law's orders, and she left her homeland and went to and followed the Israelites who had to roam from place to place according to the curse in the Bible. So these Israelites and these Jewish people, she was there, and she went there, and later on she gave birth. Her grandson was David, who is considered the father of the Jews. But when she left her homeland and she went to a strange place, she felt lonely and homesick and forlorn because she was not with her people. And the poet imagines that she might have felt a sense of peace and solace when she was alone and homesick and lonely because her husband was already dead, and she was all by herself among strange people in an alien land. Alien corn means alien fields. The corn is just a expression to give the idea that she was away in an alien land, in a foreign land, in a strange place among strangers. So she might have felt peace when she heard you singing. It might have reminded her of home and given her a sense of comfort. And this song is not only melodious, but it has magic because it opens the doors of imagination. Casements means windows. So these casements, or these windows of the mind and the soul and the heart and the imagination, open up. This is like the magic key which unlocks windows, and you get a vision of fairy lands. That is what Keats himself is experiencing. He had a vision of a magical never land, which has lifted him out of his despair and he has created something beautiful and something perfect and something everlasting. Now the last stanza, forlorn, the very word is like a bell to tell me back from where thee to my soul self, to tell me back from thee to my soul self. Adieu, the fancy cannot cheat so well as she is famed to do, deceiving elf. Adieu, adieu, the plaintive's anthem fades. Fast past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillsides, and now the buried deep, in the next valley glades. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled is that music, do I wake or sleep? So the last stanza takes Keats back to reality, and he expresses his feeling of being bereft. Adieu, adieu means goodbye. And he repeats the word adieu again and again, as if he is trying to chase behind a dream which he knows is impossible. So with a heavy heart, he says goodbye to that fading vision, to that dream, to that bird perhaps, because we don't really know whether it's a real bird or just a symbol of his longing. But the song and the dream fade away. As he says, they seem to recede further and further away over the valley, over the stream, over the glades, and soon lost and become just a memory. But this memory or this experience or this vision has left this great ode for all mankind to read, to be charmed by the loveliness, the beauty of the poet's vision, the imagination of his fevered mind, and also revel in the loveliness of that imagination. Thank you. I will discuss Keats's other odes in the next lecture. Please like and subscribe and stay tuned.